addressed and deliberated upon in regard to the development and financial contributions policy and the revenue and financing policy. And ordinarily, during deliberations, you'll consider the matters raised in submissions, along with officer feedback, and in this case, some additional information that you have requested, and then make some decisions that will enable you to adopt these policies at the end of June. Today we're going to do it in a slightly different way to the week that we normally would, so that the issues can be unpacked and openly debated as you would wish to. I've got the image of the Russian nesting dolls here because in the case of this policy there are decisions inside the decisions. And from slide 4 of the presentation, almost every slide makes reference to one or two decisions, and the proposal today is that we'll make a brief presentation on that decision, take questions, debate, make a decision, and then move on to the next one. Because there are decisions inside decisions, we've tailored the order to enable you to make those decisions in a way that doesn't preclude further decisions. Now, some of the smaller decisions here were ones that there was a little bit of variety of opinion amongst elected members at your last workshop. And you'll remember that when you adopted the draft for consultation, you took, I think, 10 resolutions as one, so there wasn't an opportunity to re-debate those. And you now have public submissions that oppose or amend some of those earlier decisions, and we have over the next 3.5 hours almost 30 separate recommendations. So there are things in here that you will want and need to debate. There are things in here that you will actually be pretty much already all on the same page. If you're on the same page, agree you're on the same page and move on, because there's plenty else to do. I should have added that there are 7 themes under which the recommendations have been ordered. That's been spelt out on your memo regarding these deliberations, and the first of those is underlying assumptions and methodology. And the first topic there was the decision to use the medium-high growth projection as the population basis for deciding growth. Now, alongside each heading, I have got references to where this information can be found. Due to the considerable success I was having immediately before the workshop, getting the technology to cooperate, I don't actually have the workshop papers available on my desktop, but it was a workshop that was held on the 18th of March. And this was, you'll recall, a graph which showed a really strong alignment between the medium-high growth projection from Stats New Zealand and our long-term movement in population. This was not a controversial issue when it was workshopped here on the 18th of March. Some submitters disagree with this, and so the question for you to consider is the medium-high projection still preferred? Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we'll get a gauge of the room. Happy? Seeing some nods.
I've got my light on.
Yeah, Councillor Gibson.
May as well start off now. Agree for all except Mount Somers. I don't think that they are going to be on the traction of medium high, but I think that that issue can be dealt with separately. So I don't think we need to adjust it here, but I think that there will be a mechanism coming.
Thank you. Happy, Richard?
I am. The second of the underlying assumptions related to the decision to remove the applied growth factor. This was is a feature of the current and previous policies where we have a scheme growth factor which represents the expected growth across an entire water scheme or wastewater scheme, and we have a project growth factor, and as a matter of policy we applied the lower of those two growth factors. And this was workshopped with general agreement on the 18th of March. We did have one submitter express opposition to the removal of this. I would acknowledge that there's still some, if you like, historical legacy from the applied growth factor days still inherent in the calculations. We've got projects in here that have been over a couple of policies, and to suddenly reinvent or increase the growth proportion for a project you've been collecting DCs on seemed an overreach. And so there is a little bit of legacy of the applied growth factor, but our recommendation is that the change be confirmed.
Happy with change confirmed?
Yep.
Nods all round, thank you.
Next issue relates to peak as opposed to average demand. This is something that's in the detail of the methodology, and it wasn't addressed specifically at the workshop in March. We use this, it's in the policy when we talk about the methods for calculating DCs on non-residential development, and the proposal now is that officers, when considering those non-residential developments, would factor in peak rather than average demand. This is because we need to be able to supply the services, the water, the wastewater, when demand is at peak. So this isn't a change that is in the DC dollars per HUE. It impacts on the individual calculations for non-residential developments. And our recommendation is that you confirm the change.
Question from Councillor Cameron.
Thank you. So it's non-residential. Is that why non? How do you separate out commercial versus residential demand? How do you? So if there's growth, are you talking about growth from commercial?
Now what we're saying, with residential development, it's a house, and a house is one HUE, except under our policy for, we're suggesting it for non-consented small standalone dwellings, I'll be 0.5, but a house
You're going
is
to have to speak up, Richard. I can't hear you very well.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. We're talking about non-residential because residential developments
Yeah.
are an HUE. One house is one HUE.
Yeah.
We don't have to calculate the growth. That's the default setting. But for non-residential, we have to say, well, how many houses worth of growth is this non-residential development?
Okay. So the non-residential will then be contributing to the peak demand, is what you're assuming.
Yes, and we're assuming that the households contribute to peak demand
the
as well.
average demand, but they're not. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
How do you calculate that average versus the peak demand?
Essentially, if it was a motel unit, you're looking at how many beds and how many units is how many people you can have on the premises at one time.
And if it was industrial sort of setup, how do you work that out?
That's in some cases, if it's an existing development that's expanding, then we've got some data on their water use and wastewater. If it's brand new, then we are reliant on what the developers tell us about what they're developing.
And can they put in because obviously if it's a big industrial complex and it's not using any water, we could come up with a number because of its size, it's a big amount of water. Can they put in a limit their peak? Because it's obviously a peak compared to average could be many times higher, couldn't it, than the average. The average could be 1 litre and the peak could be 20 litres. So they would argue that, well, I'm never going to use 20 because my thing. So is there a way they can limit that peak Because that would help us too if they limit their peak, would it?
We're always happy when working with developers if they've got ways in which they can manage their demand to reduce the call out of services. I can think of a specific example at Mount Hutt, where I can't recall whether it was water supply or wastewater, but we came to a solution with those developers, and then we applied the DCs that reflected that solution.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Just wondering how you deal with someone builds a block of new shops, so you actually don't know what the use is going to be, and then once it's built, a laundromat goes into one which has a high water use. How do you deal with that? Because, you know, when it's built, you don't know if there's going to be one person or 10 people in there.
Yep. When you're dealing with a non-residential development, often you don't know, is it going to be a high water demand, is it going to be high roading demand? And we've got a slide later on that talks about taking development contributions at subdivision. And we actually had a submission from Mr. McLaughlin, who said, you know, you can't know the scope of what's going on there. He was using it to argue about taking DCs at residential subdivision, and in that case he was stretching his argument a little far, but he's absolutely right in terms of commercial, retail, industrial. So we would actually say in those situations you're better to wait until you know what's going on in the section to determine what the use is.
Okay. Councillors, any debate on peak, not average? All those happy with the change? Confirmed, Richard, thank you.
At the workshop on the 18th of March, I talked about how we do special assessments, because I thought we had written in to our process a special assessment. I was wrong, actually. What we had was a methodology, and after we applied our methodology and discovered that that the developer was unhappy with the outcome of that, what we then had was dialogue and reconsideration, and I felt that it was important that we do have a process documented for when the methodology produces an outcome but the developers or the council are not happy with. What I really liked about what we were doing was the spirit of that dialogue and reconsideration.
Councillor Cameron.
Can you give me an example of when you would use this, please? Special assessment for unusual development. What is an unusual development?
The one that I most remember has been one we talked about a little bit here, which was there's an apple orchard that was building
Okay.
a seasonal worker accommodation,
Okay.
and so we had to work out what was the right number based on their demand, given their location and the other aspects of it.
Okay, so you'd call that an unusual development rather than a multi, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, any debate on, Councillor Cookson?
Do we have details on the special assessment process? Like, have you written that yet, or you're just recognising that you?
It's in the draft DC policy. It's Appendix 3, which is the methodology, and it's pages 22 to 24 of the policy.
Whereabouts is the draft, Richard?
The draft is, give me a second.
Is it the revenue and financing? I think I've.
The easiest place to find it actually is at itsourplace.nz.
We'll get you the link and flick it through.
Thank you. To 24.
do we need to park that one and have a read up and come back, do you think? No? Should be in your email, councillors. (22 to 24).
It's pretty extended. Most policies have this as a way of sort of acknowledging that not every development will fit in a set bucket.
Yeah, I can't recall who's plagiarised.
Well, most of them have it. You could pick anyone. Do you want to make that point? Because it's, you know, again, you just.
Yep.
I see some nods, so the question is, do we approve special assessment process?
It's essentially designed to be a suitably vague clause that any development that doesn't fit nicely within a bucket of your policy can be addressed without going through a legal reconsideration or objection process. And again, most policies, most development contribution policies have this provision to give council officers and developers a little bit of flexibility to come up with a logical DC.
And all I'd add to that is that when we talked about differentials, and I made reference to George Orwell's statement about following the rules around the English language, and the last rule was do anything other than do something that's outright barbarous. As we work with a new methodology, if we find ourselves dealing with a special assessment, the object is not to, the object is to get a good, fair outcome for council and the developer. It's not to follow the letter of a procedure to the point that we have something that's outright barbarous.
Thanks, Richard. Happy? All good.
The next topic is the Mount Somers Water DC methodology, and there is another decision later on that relates to the quantum of the DC at Mount Somers. This relates to the fact that we used a particular approach to calculate the DC for this water supply, and we only applied that methodology to the one project because of the high, medium to long-term capacity of this particular asset. And we know that this DC is contentious in the local community. So from a position of protecting council from risk, that we use a different methodology, but we don't spell the methodology out in our policy, I think we should be reflecting this particular exception within the methodology. I've got some words to write to do that, but that's our recommendation.
Questions or debate? Councillor Gilkison?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what I've said before. I still think that the growth that is attributed to this project is too high, but I appreciate we've got to keep it within a certain methodology in terms to protect council. So as I said before, I think there's another way we can deal with this.
Councillor Wilson.
Just to clarify, so in the policy it's 18,134 plus GST, is that correct?
Sounds right.
Yep, that's right.
The part of the methodology that's unique here is that we've taken the short-term and the medium to long-term capacity of the project and treated it as two separate items, and we don't do that for any other asset. So that's why I'm highlighting the issue.
Just to be clear, at the moment we're not discussing the actual amount, we're just discussing the methodology.
Absolutely correct, yes.
Is the feeling around the table happy? Nods, nods. Thank you.
Okay. The next issue is the affordable housing discount. This was a submitter proposal. I think it was a submission from Kim Miller, and which is that council should consider offering a discount on DCs for affordable housing. This wasn't part of our proposal that we went out to consult on. I can tell you that Christchurch City, in quite recent times, I think it was 2025, has introduced an affordable housing discount into their policy. What we heard from submitters, in particular from Mr. McLaughlin again, was that the Ashburton market has a strong affordability focus. And so I'm not sure whether there's the same requirement that they identified in Christchurch to offer the opportunity of such a discount.
Councillor Cameron.
Can you, where do we have affordable housing defined?
That's only one of the policy questions that would have to be unpacked if you want to go down the track of an affordable housing
So
discount.
who would pay for the DC if we did give a discount on it once we had determined what affordable housing was? Who would pay for the DC once we did give the discount on affordable housing? As for, excuse me, as for any other DC, and who pays for it? Once the investment in the infrastructure has been undertaken.
If we were to offer a discount on affordable housing or any other kind of discount, at the moment, that discount is effectively being paid for by ratepayers.
So
if you
that
wanted
means
to be
people-
really transparent, you would set aside a fund and you would take the money out of that fund to reimburse the loan repayments on that asset.
And the fund would be paid for by ratepayers.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think we need to be aware that if we review our DCs, somebody else is going to pay the account.
Councillor Gilkison.
Yeah, I think from first look, it seems like a good idea, but at the end of the day, there's still people coming in and someone still does have to pay. So I think in terms of social housing, yes, that's fine if it's filling a need, but I think for affordable housing, not knowing exactly what that means, to Councillor Cameron's point, it would have to be defined quite low, which I'm not really sure is worth going down that road.
Liz.
Thank you. And I'm just thinking about affordable housing as a tag, and I think social housing. So what would come under affordable housing? Would it be Kainga Ora houses and maybe Haven housing, or are you going to open it up and pick a number to say anything under this cost? I think social housing is probably the better word for it.
I think, to my mind, the difference between social housing and affordable housing is that social housing is generally provided by non-profit
That's
operators.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas affordable housing can be provided from anybody in the market, and the affordability basically relates to purchase price.
Okay. I'd leave this one.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'm going to leave just simply because affordable housing. Who owns affordable housing? Is it a property investor, or is it? So the renting point is where the affordability comes, not the ownership of the house. Because because we can't dictate who owns a house. We can't say you can only buy it if you're certified. We will never do that. Anybody should be able to buy a house wherever it is.
Councillor Todd.
Thank you. I think, what is affordable is the big question. Oh, sorry. I think the question is what is affordable, really, and if you compare to Christchurch, then Ashburton probably is more affordable than Christchurch, so I don't think we should go down that track.
Okay, all those in favour of doing nothing? Thanks, Richard. No.
Another submitted proposal was for a DC discount for small scale builders. While an affordable housing discount, you could kind of get an idea of what they were talking about. This one was much harder to interpret. The reasoning was a little unclear. Are we talking about all small scale builders? How do you define what is a small scale builder? Why discount one set of builders over another? It seemed, even to my curious and open-minded policy advisor brain, fraught. And hence the recommendation is we take no further action on this proposal.
Councillor Cameron.
Did that come up in our consultation, the discount for small scale builders?
Yes, it was raised by, again, Kim Miller in her submission.
Okay. I concur with Richard. I don't think it's something that we can measure, and
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. I'm a take no further action. The way I read that one was maybe someone just splitting their section in two, so they were a small scale developer more than a builder, is the way I sort of interpreted it, but yeah.
Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, I was going to go the same way. If I was subdividing my section, maybe we would need a bit more clarity around that.
Okay, all those happy with take no further action? Next, please.
Yep. The next issue is when current HUEs have not paid DCs. And this was actually identified in the chamber during a public excluded discussion on a remission request. But as a result of the questions, we now know as for a fact that 9 sections at Mount Somers were treated as connected HUEs rather than growth HUEs, meaning that the growth capex had been distributed across a smaller number of HUEs than it should have been. The difference in dollars per HUE is around $350, including GST. I would add that we are trying to create reports to identify whether this issue is repeated elsewhere, and not elsewhere at Mount Somers, but elsewhere in terms of Require, Ashburton, Methven, etc., and the extent of the impact. It remains to be seen whether we've actually got the capacity to get this information to you before you adopt on the 30th of June, and if we can't do that, we'll be factoring it into the next DC policy. Questions?
Councillor Gilkison.
So if you undertook this piece of work, would you be looking to change, would all the DCs basically change once if you found out that this had been applied in other places?
Yeah, it could have an impact on every DC. Obviously in a town the size of Ashburton, where you've got over 2,000 growth HUEs, the impact's going to be very small. It's potentially more substantial in smaller communities like Hines, and Require would be another one that we'd prioritise taking a look at.
It's my understanding that even though it was done like this, there's not actually any double charging or anything as such. Is that correct?
We're certainly not making anybody pay their DC twice, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering between the risk to council also weighted with this amount of work. And I mean, you've given Mount Somers as the example, but as Ian has clarified for me, no one has paid the water DC in Mount Somers yet.
That's right.
So for them, we can quite easily, that will rectify itself. So I think based on that information, I don't think that work needs to be undertaken unless you want a hobby.
Councillor Wilson.
Can you just clarify that? So that the 9 examples where the current, so it's current properties have not been charged to DC. So it's a timing thing you're talking about, isn't it? Is that what you're talking about?
Yep. What happened is that when a subdivision was done at Mount Somers, as a condition of the subdivision, the subdivider has to provide a water connection to the boundary of each property. And that was done. In our rating system, under our rating policies, we treat that as a connected property, and they pay a water rate. When we are trying to calculate our DCs, we get a report on the number of connected properties, and so we had 9 properties that were physically connected to the boundary, but they did not have a house. They were not drawing any water to pay a DC. That was the issue.
They were paying the full water rate.
They are paying full water rate, yes. That is a rating policy matter which I'd invite you not to debate today.
It's, oh, I'm not there, oh yeah.
Councillor Cameron.
So they have, so just to clarify, they haven't yet started the building of their home.
No, they haven't applied for a building consent.
Well, I don't understand what the issue is.
The issue is that because we've treated them as if they have, we have reduced the number of future HUEs across which we spread
Yes.
the
Yeah.
capex for growth. And so we're asking everyone to pay a little bit too much. Good morning, Councillor Everest.
Please, sorry. Murphy's Law.
G'day, how are you?
Hi, Phil. Thank you for joining. We're just setting up a screen so we can see when you've got a question.
It's okay, thank you.
Further questions, councillors? With some debate. Phil, Councillor Everest? No.
O2.
Councillor Maxwell?
A question, probably not for now, but so depending on how many years they have been connected and paying a water rate, is there any form of discount for their DC later because they've been paying for that connection? I don't know if this is the debate that should be had now, but needs to be thought of, I think.
When they're paying their water rate, they're paying for access to a service. When they're paying their DC, they're paying for the consumption of the service, if you like. So I wouldn't, I'm not, my initial response is I'm not convinced that that's necessarily a grounds for a discount. The reason for doing this is to give people confidence in the accuracy of our work. It's not to give me a really stimulating hobby.
Councillor Ellis?
Thank you. Do you think you would have time, and I know the impact's not as great, but to do the whole district before we have to adopt this policy? Because if not, to pick on one area just seems a bit harsh. And I think then you park it till the next time we do this because, so that's,
I'm reliant on the what we call the business improvement team in IS, and I'm conscious that this month through to year end and the start of the new financial year is a really busy time for them. So I've asked them, can they help? But I know that I have a fairly significant doubt that we can get every DC in the schedule sorted in this way, and some of them, like community infrastructure and roading, are actually a little bit more tricky as well. So, I'm not super confident, and that's not because I don't have confidence in them. I just think it'll take a bit of time to unpack.
just for me doesn't feel right just to pick on the easy one because it's easy and not do the others, but that's just me.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. Councillor
Just like to clarify, so at the moment we have a policy that you pay half the rate if it goes past your gate, the water, is that correct, if you're not connected? And then you pay the full rate if you're connected. And just to get my thinking right, so we've assumed that once you're connected, you're one of the team, as it was, one of the rest. So in Mount Somers, we assumed that these 9 houses were part of the existing connection before we did the upgrade, and we were looking to charge DCs after that point. Is that am I on the right place on that?
I think you are on the right place. The only point of clarification I would make is that what you've described is our approach in terms of water, not wastewater.
Yes, so, and we're talking water here, aren't we?
Yes, we are talking water here.
And so now we're saying that in Mount Somers, we're looking to 9 properties that have been connected from, that we believed were connected fully because they didn't have a house built on them. We're saying they're not connected to the network and they're going to be DCs afterwards. And the calculation is non-DC paid properties, is that correct?
And our calculation does not reflect the fact that they have yet to pay a DC. That's right.
Okay.
Councillor Cameron.
Just to head back to Russell's comment, we know about the 9 in Mount Somers, but we do not know about any. There will be others, I understand, well, I infer from your comments, but we don't know where they are or how many they are. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So Russell's comment and wait till we know, we don't know how long it'll take us to know, I'm assuming.
I certainly don't have confidence that we can know that
No.
before the 30th of June.
So we need to put that aside, that remark of Russell's, and have a debate on what we do know, I'm assuming. Yeah.
Well, I think Russell was indicating park it till.
We can't until the 30th of June.
No, I think we can. And then get the information for the next time this comes around. Is that right, Richard? And when is that?
I'd like to think we're going to take a couple of days off DCs and then roar into it within a month or so. Yeah, we've got a 2027 review that lines up with our long-term plan. So it won't be long before it's back in front of you.
Yeah. So I guess it's making the change now. Otherwise, you can't make the change again until really the 30th of June 2027. So whether you wanted to make this change, given what you know at this point in time, and then make the rest once you know more at that later point.
Councillor Wilson?
Just how historic are some of these 9? Just, I'm using the 9, but I'm saying I'm talking about the greater general across the whole district. So when you've said this, we know what they are today by the connections that's in our database, and you're going to go back and look at ones that haven't effectively got houses on. So how do you actually find out who they are? Do you have to physically look at the empty sections, do you?
That's what we did at Mount Somers, but to do that across the whole district is another kettle of fish. So actually what we would do for water DCs, for example, is we would generate a report that tells us who's paying a full water rate, and we would generate another report which says, does this property have a building consent? And when we have a property that's on both lists, or it's paying full water rate and it doesn't have a building consent, we know it's one that's in the wrong bucket.
So I would have thought that would mean that many small blocks that have 6 sheep and 2 donkeys on it are using that. They're happy to pay their water rate because they're using that to feed their stock water to their animals. So they would be penalised on that basis, would they not? That you would be assuming that there's no.
Yeah. Fortunately, the business improvement team is smarter than I am in just describing. What you do is you would look at all the properties that pay an urban township water rate, as opposed to every property in the district. Because if a rural property is outside a township, it's not on council water.
I wasn't insinuating
water
that. I was insinuating in town, many of the empty sections we talk about in the rural communities,
yeah.
if they're paying a full water rate, we'll be using water, maybe not very much, but for feeding a cow or a sheep or something on that piece of land.
Okay.
And so if we're going to go back and put them in this mechanism, we're actually going, but we could go back quite historically, because a lot of the small towns have a lot of sections that have been empty for many years. So I'm probably reluctant to go there because I don't think we need to, because I think there's been a precedent set in the past, and now we set a point in time and go forward from there rather than looking away back, because we're going into, people have been using the water and have been paying the rates, so I don't know why you'd go back. I would have thought you'd go forward.
So do you think this error should be corrected? This one, no. Okay. Councillor Cameron?
Do we have the capability of undertaking that assessment that you're referring to? Where we go
I think
through and
we
look
do.
at
I
who's
just
paying
have
the water
doubts
rates
about our ability to do it within the time frame.
Yeah. So you think we can do it? We do have the IT capability to do that?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I wonder why we haven't done that then, if that's the case.
Because we didn't know it was a problem until
I mean,
a couple of council
so
meetings
who
ago.
is paying for then the development of the water infrastructure then of these people that have built, not talking about richest people, but the people that have built on this section, who is, presumably that's picked up by the other
The people that
ratepayers
have
in the
built have
community.
paid a DC, unless they built before DCs are even a thing.
Yeah, and those that haven't built.
It's those that haven't built that are on the wrong side of the ledger for the calculation that we're trying to identify.
Yeah, but
So
they
the
haven't built,
person
so I
in
don't see a problem.
the person in Hines who has a residential section that's got a few head of stock on it, at the moment they won't be paying a DC, they haven't built a house.
But they're paying their water rate.
They're
though.
paying their water rate, and the stock are enjoying the benefit of the water, and the property owners enjoying the fact that their stock are got an adequate supply of water. What would change is that property would not be counted for future HUEs. So what would happen in Hines, if you took those properties out of the calculation, is that the DC comes down a little bit because their potential for future use. But I sense that regardless of what we do after 30th of June, we're not, I don't get a sense that the room wants to push ahead with this for one
I think
township
no.
ahead of all the others.
Councillor Ellis?
Thank you. No, I mean we're only talking about the calculation used to establish these. It's like those sections in height. It's not going to have a massive impact. It's not a big thing. I think we need to do the work, but I would postpone us having this debate and talking about it until 2027 and deal with the whole lot together. To pick on one area just because we happen to know about it, because it just feels uncomfortable.
Even though, sorry, just to challenge that,
no.
even though this will help to lower the Mount Somers water DC?
I'm going to throw that one to Deb. There you go.
Councillor Gilkerson?
I guess my question to Richard is, how much will this mitigate risk to council in terms of, we've had people requesting information on the growth aspect to council and things like this, and I guess this piece of information does impact the growth factor, because the people who haven't paid their DC are basically, they've been included in the growth, yet they haven't paid the DC, which is why. So if they weren't, then it would be lower. So it's not double counting, but in terms of accuracy of our methodology, again, what's the risk?
The risk is around someone taking some kind of legal challenge. And there are a couple of steps they can take in terms of the Local Government Act. They can ask for a reconsideration of the calculation, and they can take an objection to a Development Contribution Commissioner. In both cases, essentially what's being tested is whether council has correctly applied its policy. I'd need probably some advice from Mrs. Paddock, but I suspect that if I were to give advice to council on risk, and I'm not the most qualified person to do that, particularly legal risk, but if someone came to me and said, you know, those numbers are wrong and it should be $350 cheaper, I'd give them an invoice that was $350 lower and settle it then and there. Whether if someone chooses to take some kind of high court action challenging the validity of our policy, whether this, how big a risk that would pose to council, I'm probably not competent to answer, but it certainly makes me uncomfortable because I am very risk averse as a person. And everyone in this room probably has a different appetite for risk.
Tanya, do you have a comment?
Obviously, you've heard Richard's view in terms of our policy, so I'm not quite sure how to answer this. There is a risk. I mean, we've talked about our policy not being correct, so yes, there's a risk. I can't really say anything. I'm not comfortable saying anything more in a public forum. I think you need to make a call based on the information that's before you and how you want to proceed based on that risk now. It's been identified.
Yeah, so I guess in response to those comments, then I think we know this, we need to apply this. It's not worth the risk. Sorry, Walter. Sorry.
Yeah, look, I think the key point about, as you say, we do know there's a mismatch here and it's a relatively simple fix. It's less than 2% of the Mount Somers DC, and we know there's probably issues elsewhere, but I don't think we need to go on a witch hunt. DCs are not a perfect number. They're not. We don't know exactly how many houses we're going to get. We don't know exactly how much we're going to spend on these growth projects. So we just have to base the policy on the best information we have at hand. And in this case, because we do know about these 9 properties, it's a relatively simple fix that reduces one of the highest DCs in the district. So I think it's logical to make, but that doesn't mean we have to go and try and make everything else perfect, because nothing is perfect. And yeah, no one's going to take Ashburton District Council to the High Court for a $20,000 water DC, because they'd spend hundreds of thousands doing that. But it's a simple fix to make now. It's been identified through the draft process, which is quite often where these little minor calculation issues pop up, and it's a relatively simple fix that doesn't really have any downside, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is also the DC with the highest risk at the moment, given information requests, etc.
Councillor Maxwell.
Walter's just said everything I was going to say. I think we know this. It is the highest DC we have. This is one where we can fix it because we know what it is. And yes, it only targets them right now, but because we know it, it's going to look worse if we ignore it or park it for a year. That's my personal view.
Councillor Cameron.
I tend to agree. I think our job is not to undertake risky behaviour on behalf of the ratepayer. So I tend to think we should not be. I think we should deal with what we know. Yep. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Yes, and I've now changed my mind with that further information, so their DC will come down to $20,504, including GST. So.
Happy with the steer, Richard?
Thank you. The next issue we've got was raised by the submitter Clark McLeod. and it relates to capacity credits. So in our policy, capacity credit recognises that we gave the example of you build a house, you have a fire, you demolish the house, and as long as you rebuild within 5 years, you get credit for the capacity that it already had in the system. There are other circumstances other than fires and demolitions. If you knock down a house and build 3 townhouses on the section, you get the capacity for the first house offset against the 3 new ones, and if you do the same thing in a commercial or industrial context. So our policy is 5 years, and our policy is unique in that we also offer developers the opportunity to come to council and request an extension, and as stated in the summary of feedback, we don't get many, and when we do, council has been supportive of granting those extensions. The practice varies a bit in Canterbury. At 5 years, ours is the lowest limit. Selwyn has a 10-year limit. Christchurch has a 20-year limit. And Hurinuri, Kaikoura and Waitaki are all open-ended. Our recommendation is to retain the status quo. I'd have to say that conversations with Walter, this is not a ditch that officers would die on. If you wanted to extend it further, we would not have any great objection to that. But your call. Over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Thank you for that information on what our nearest neighbours are doing. Because of that, I would be more comfortable with a longer period, I think 10 years. I assume Christchurch went 20 years because following on from the earthquakes, the capacity to actually rebuild was a timeline in itself. So, and natural disasters can always happen, but it was good to hear that we do offer extensions under those sort of circumstances. But I would be more comfortable if it was with longer than 5 years.
Thank you. Mealis?
I was just going to say, if we're offering the opportunity for extension, I'd just leave it at status quo, because there's 5 years in there already, and everyone can apply. I mean, it obviously sounds like we don't get many of these. That was going to be my question, but you said that there's not very.
Not many. I think Eastfields is probably one.
Eastfields, okay. Mm.
Councillor Todd.
Thank you. I agree that we should actually extend it to 10 years so that we comply with Selwyn. While Christchurch is 20 years, they were 10 years before the earthquake. So to me, 10 years is a logical number to end up on, so we are all compatible.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I would go 10 years too, because I think it takes at least a year from when you demolish a house till you get one rebuilt. That's best practice. And if you're going to do a development, you want a bit more time. And actually, we'd be much more comfortable if derelict houses were demolished and the section was left clean and tidy and ready for the development, rather than people holding a house up, not demolishing it for 10 years so that they can make sure they fit within this. So if they had a bit more time frame, they would be happy to demolish and sit as it was.
Great point. Councillor Moffat.
Richard may have answered my question. I'm just wondering the pros and cons of an open-ended option. Is it just what Richard said?
When we first developed this, when I worked at Waitaki on their policy, particularly in the early days, one of the rationales for wanting to have a time limit was did we have the confidence in our record keeping to keep track of where development had been and had been removed from. I think these days our information systems are getting stronger and stronger, and so I think that risk is getting smaller and smaller. I like the idea of having some limit. At the very least, it acts as a discouragement for people to just kind of land bank their land in the long term. So,
Okay, get a feel for 10 years. All in favour? Against? Happy, Richard?
yes, thank you. When you say, am I happy, am I clear that what council's decided?
Yes.
Yes, I am.
I know you're happy generally.
Yep. Yeah, but you're not here to make decisions that I approve of, is my clarification. Clause 12.2, this is the invoicing clause. Raising it here for two reasons. There was a submission from a Mr. Lindsay who wanted to pay his DC before he lodged the building consent. And I wanted to be clear that this clause, as it stands, addresses his submission. So he will have the opportunity on the 1st of July to come in and pay his DC. Secondly, Walter and I have discussed that there was a bit of a gap in this clause. Normally, these clauses, they'll say something like, it's normal to list all the possible triggers from subdivision, building consent, service connection, land use resource consent, and now small standalone dwellings. So those are all things that can trigger a DC, and they each have a related time when you would invoice. But normally what council would do is reserve to itself the discretion about when it chooses to invoice. And the reason for this is twofold. We've talked about the non-residential subdivision where we'd actually choose to take the DCs at building consent when we know what's being built. And another circumstance, and this is just learning from a lesson of another council, who went out and they were putting up their DCs with a hiss and a roar, and they got inundated with applications for subdivisions and building consents and all sorts of things. People getting in ahead of the big increase in the DC. And they thought that they would protect their future revenue by saying we're not going to take them at subdivision, we're going to take them all at building consent. Unfortunately, their policy was written in a way that said they will in every case take it at the first trigger, which was subdivision. So they had so much money at stake, but they decided to give it a crack, and they were challenged legally and they were found wanting. So I just didn't want to give you a policy that put you in that sort of position if you found yourself there. I do think, given what we've consulted on in terms of 1 July 2027, that it would be an extremely dirty trick to turn around when all those subdivisions come in before 1st of July and say, ha ha ha, we're going to take them at building consent. I don't think we should do that, but I think in the future after that, you should give yourself the flexibility.
Any questions or debate, councillors? Happy? Councillor Gilkison?
Sorry, I'm just quickly reading it again to remind myself. Can you just give me an example in practice when this kicks in? Sorry, I just need another explanation.
When invoicing kicks in, or when we would choose
so if
to
you're
exercise
so
our
when
discretion?
when does this go in? So
the most likely circumstance where council would exercise its discretion to take to invoice for DCs later than at the earliest opportunity would be the industrial or commercial subdivision. So someone we do a subdivision at the business park. Someone buys one of our sections. We don't know whether they're going to put a wet industry on it or some kind of light manufacturing that is relatively low in terms of water consumption. We don't charge the DC at subdivision, or we could charge like one HUE at subdivision, but calculate the rest at building consent. So that's probably the most likely example.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Steer, we're happy. Seeing nods. Thanks, Richard.
The next couple of slides are where we had some requests for information. So there aren't any decisions required on the matters in the next couple of slides, but it's a matter of you being clear about the information we've given you, and then just to keep it in mind for decisions that may be impacted by your views on this as we work through. Mr. Chairman, I once had a really wonderful public experience when my son pocket dialed me during a council meeting, and I couldn't make the thing stop ringing, and then I couldn't turn it off, and then I ended up throwing it in the back of the room. So my phone is off, and I don't know what the time is. So
10:05.
Okay, I'm not sure what has been scheduled in terms of morning tea, but I'll leave it with the chairman, as always, to decide when we want to move on to something.
I'm picking what you're laying down as you'd like a cup of tea, Richard.
No, what I'm laying down is I have no idea when you want me to stop talking so that you can have a cup of tea. But that's cool. So the first of these, we had a number of submissions who were concerned about the cumulative effect of development contributions on economic activity. And in the summary of feedback, it starts at page 41 and it goes beyond page 41, I'm sure. Also pages 57 to 59 and page 62. If I was to try and summarise our advice, it would be if you add more cost to a development by increasing a development contribution, yeah, it will have some impact. Not all of that impact is negative. If developers have to account for the full costs of what they're doing, as opposed to having ratepayers pick up some of that cost, then it's a good economic reality check that their development should be going ahead. There are also a number of other factors, many more than development contributions, that will influence how viable a development is. Mortgage interest rates, labour, availability and the price of skilled labour in the construction industry. There are a number of others, most of which neither developers nor council have very much control over. Happy to answer any questions on the officer information provided.
Any questions, councillors? Happy to receive the information, keep it in mind.
Yep.
Thank you, Richard.
Yep. The next issue is two related issues. The first was we had a number of submitters who had questions about the causal nexus, and that's the link between their development and the requirement to pay a DC. And in addition to that, elected members asked for more information on where we spend our DC and how that relates to current developments in our communities. In the simplest of terms, the causal nexus is that we build assets that have capacity for growth because we know our district has grown steadily over time. New developments consume that growth capacity, and that's why we expect them to pay DCs. We don't tend to think about our DCs on an asset-by-asset basis or on a development we do calculate them on a development-by-development basis, but when we're looking at a development, we're thinking, what is the DC per HUE in this catchment? We're not saying, Mr. Brown has built this subdivision here, is going to use that pipeline, that pump station, and that bore to get water to that development, and therefore we're only going to charge DCs on those pieces of infrastructure. That's not how we do it. The reason that we don't do it that way is that it becomes horrendously complicated and administratively time-consuming to calculate every DC. In addition to which, if you take Ashburton Water as an example, in Ashburton Township we have 8 bores across the township. They're linked by a network of pipes and pumps to service every home, business and community building. If we need to take a bore out of commission for repairs or upgrading, we can do that because we've built that redundancy into the network. We can close the line here, we can close the bore here and still get water where it needs to be. In that sense, the whole asset services the whole town. Wastewater systems are slightly different, but they do have, they tend to have one treatment plant. It's usually amongst the more expensive parts of the system, and every connected property benefits from that. You could look at the reticulation and say, well, the reticulation in Tynwald that goes to Ocean Farm could be paid for entirely out of Tynwald, and you could work out how you divvy up the reticulation in Ashburton. We don't do that just because of the complexity of doing the calculation. Some of our neighbours are taking approaches like that. Christchurch City do it with roading. They've divided the city into 6 or 7 roading areas, and they look at which projects and which areas have the most benefit. If you really wanted to give me a hobby, you'd go down that path. So, and the reason we don't do that complexity is that for us, the costs just outweigh the benefits. Happy to answer any other questions. And that's why I haven't been able to give you an answer that I think you were hoping for when the question was first asked about, you know, what infrastructure we have in our schedules that works for Strowan Fields or Coniston Farms or Ashbury Grove. Because we just haven't ever approached it that way.
No lights picking, we're happy to receive the information. Thank you.
Yep. We had a request for how many available vacant sections there are. And Brad Thompson, the planning manager, picked this one up for me. He says you've got to be really careful where you look, because if you just look at available sections that are listed, you might not realise that there are almost 800 new allotments that have been consented but are not yet available on the market. He said in addition to that 800, there's a further 510 sections that are in one case are subject of an approved plan change. There's 160 lots there. We've had a newly lodged plan change for a couple more stages of Strowan Fields. That's another 350 sections. So at that point you're talking about 1,310 sections. And we are aware of some other development proposals that are in the pipeline, but they are we're available of that on a confidential basis. I'm not able to talk about those publicly. Brad's summary of the overall picture is that we have an adequate supply of section for the foreseeable future. He added that that is also confirmed by the Ashburton Residential and Business Land Economic Assessment Report, which I think was a year ago-ish. So, happy to answer any questions.
No questions? Thank you.
So the next issue relates to the new district roading DC, and there are 4 decisions that relate to this. but the first is kind of the high level question in principle of yes or no. Do you want one or do you not? We can talk about the detail if you do want one. If you don't want one at this point, then we can skip the next 1.5 slides. If your answer is yes, then effectively that's also telling us that you do want to amend your revenue and financing policy.
I'm going to say
Ellis.
yes. Yes.
All those yes?
Cool.
And Phil, online, thank you, unanimous.
Next issue was the question of the whole of network catchment. We did have some submitters who didn't like the idea of the whole of network catchment. It was something that you even discussed in pros and cons at an earlier workshop. Our reason for going out with the whole of network catchment was that this is very much linked to the principles by which we fund our roading operating expenditure. We do fund it across the whole district, and we do fund it as an entire network. And that kind of is similar too to the principles that we use that inform the water group and the wastewater group for operating expenditure as well. The other thing I would say is that having got to this point in the process, if you suddenly decided that actually we're no longer convinced of the whole of network catchment and we think it's time to put a ring around Ashburton and say that they'll pay twice as much as everybody else, I'm feeling uncomfortable with that from a process perspective, because you haven't given people a chance to comment on that. Hand it over back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions, Richard? Councillor Wilson?
Yes, I'm in favour of the whole of network, because I think when we start charging a road DC, the bridge is the first one, but there's many other districts charge on many other roads, and where's the district have, even though people in maybe say the northern part of the district say we don't use the bridge, but there's roads up there that we'll do up in the future, which will cost just as much and will have just as much benefit, whether there's many single road bridges around some of our network. Well, they need to be double laned eventually or made to higher weight ratings, and that's all part of the network strengthening and rebuilding over time. So if we do it as a network, we can bring other ones in, and it will be more equitable across the whole district.
Yeah, they alluded to not ever using the second bridge road, but if they're using State Highway 1 and there's less congestion on it because of the second bridge, then that's a big tick, isn't it? So confirm the whole of network. Thank you, Richard.
We've had 2 or 3 different submissions in relation to roading differentials. There was some divergence of opinion at workshop on the idea of the 2.5 retail differential. We also had Mr. McLeod, the submitter, raise concerns about what he described as the global retail development, the disruption of traditional retail by the Amazons and the Temus and so forth. There are options other than confirming the policy as proposed. For example, we could combine commercial and retail just under commercial at an HUE of 1.7. We could reframe retail as, I like to use the term big box retail, but I'm sure the planners have a more professional phrase, and make that 2.5. So that's one of the 3 issues. Were a couple of people, again, Mr. McLeod was one of them, talked about want to make sure that agricultural development is captured in the system. That was always the intention. The trick with having an agricultural differential is that agricultural development can vary quite widely. If you wanted to bring in one for dairy conversions specifically, Waitaki have a policy like that. I've got to say, as I did a minute ago though, about the whole network catchment, if you were to introduce a dairy conversion differential at the 11th hour, then federated farmers might have some concern that they didn't have an opportunity to consider that proposal and comment and submit on it. We also had a submission from Mr. John D. McGurr, and he didn't like the proposed 0.5 differential for small standalone dwellings. Mr. McGurr works in the building industry, and he's aware of small standalone dwelling proposals that have 3 bedrooms. And he says, why would a 3-bedroom small standalone dwelling get a 0.5 discount when a 2-bedroom townhouse has to pay the full? I guess the answer is that we think that the 3-bedroom small standalone dwelling is something of a rarity, and that if we were to try and draft our policy to cover every possibility of different ways people could develop or build to get around the rules, we would be here forever. So we were comfortable that the policy was robust. We felt investing more effort to make it more resistant to being taken advantage of was probably an effort that was the cost outweighed the benefits. So overall we're recommending confirm the policy as proposed. Happy to take questions and for you to debate any or all of those alternatives.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
A small standalone dwelling, is that like a tiny home?
Yeah, it's a tiny home that, this was an initiative, tiny homes have been around for a while, but in the term of the current government, they have passed legislation to enable small standalone dwellings to be non-consented. And so, we've taken the terminology from their legislation, we've taken the definitions essentially from their legislation, and we're just lining up in support of the central government the way that they line up in support of local government.
I appreciate the difficulty in having a policy that reflects changes in the community and how people live, and that we cannot always anticipate what's going to happen. I think a small standalone dwelling should pay 1 HUE because presumably that doesn't prevent them participating in road use, if they're a new facility. With regards to the retail, I think we're overly punitive on the retail, given, as we've heard, quite an eloquent presentation from Mr. McLeod, I think, that talked about changes in retail and difficulties they face, and the fact that we are trying to encourage retail for various reasons. I think retail and commercial should have the same eroding use differential, and I think that's only reasonable given commercial is a bank and commercial is a real estate agent or an office, and that would be my position.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. On a similar vein, yeah, I like the idea of combining commercial and retail at 1.7 and then big box at 2.5. I think that's a good option for me personally.
I agree. Agreement around the table?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. What did we think about the small standalone dwelling?
Just one point on that small standalone dwelling does have to be less than 70 square metres. So, well, I'm sure there's a very clever architect that can fit 3 bedrooms into that. That is getting pretty clever. So, for the most part, these will be 1 or 2 bedroom granny flats, and that's where most councils are acknowledging that the demand will be less. On average, the demand will be less than 1 HUE per small standalone dwelling, because there'll just be less people living there, less cars, less water use.
But we're talking about road using differential, aren't we? We're not talking about water.
The same philosophy applies. If there's less people living in the house, there's less cars, therefore there's less. It's not going to have a family of 5 or 6 with 4
So a
teenagers
70
driving
square
around.
metre dwelling has one person, and a
Well,
82 square metre 2-bedroom unit has one person.
Look, it's not perfect. There's always a line where
That's
and
right.
there's always going to be exceptions, and there'll always be winners and losers and loopholes. But on average, a 70 square metre granny flat will use less infrastructure than a typical 3 or 4 bedroom residential house of anywhere north of 150 to 300 square metres.
Yeah, I think some of our, and just to correct you on that wee bit, Warren, I think some of our new homes that we're having built, 150 would be a good size. Some of them don't come to 150 square metres. I think the smallest we should go down to is 1. You know, 1 per 1 HUE, we charge 1 roading DC.
Councillor Everest, your hand's just gone down.
No, it was just in support of the discussion that's going on. I wasn't sure if you were voting or not. I was just a bit out of time. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. And would it be also fair with like the granny flat type one, the property's actually already paid a DC, because normally these are in addition to an existing property, not a new section, so they've already paid a DC on that property as well, haven't they?
If I was to put
generally.
If I was to put a small standalone dwelling on my section, there'd be a DC paid for the original house, and this would attract, under our policy, another 0.5 DC.
Councillor Wilson?
So I'm comfortable with the 0.5 just simply because of that fact that we're perhaps trying to help. The people that are being made to live in some of these very small houses deserve help. Under 70 square metres, you're getting pretty tiny anyway. And the other one I'm against, I think the rural agricultural differential, because I think we have to understand that once land gets more capitalisation put into it, that increases its value, which therefore increases its rates, which means that the rate take from that rural property will actually be a bigger, won't be more because of its value, it'll be more as a proportion of the total rate takes for the district. So that actually benefits everybody else in the district by a little tiny bit. Each time we get a dairy conversion, everybody else's rates go down as a relative amount to the total pool. So the more dairy conversions we have, the better, because it actually helps reduces the rate burden for everybody else in a perverse sort of way. So
Might just get a steer first. Were we happy with the commercial around the table? The 1.7 for retail, commercial, big box at 2.5. Nods all round. Got that, Richard?
Yes.
And then small dwelling, 0.5. Happy around the table? Nods, yes. Carolyn?
I think, and I accept Richard's comment that obviously if you do a dairy conversion or you know, you add value to your property, you do pay more rates because it's based on capital value. But we are talking about a roading DC here. We're not talking about a rate DC. So presumably the dairy conversion will get 2 tanker movements a day minimum, plus feed, 1 tanker movement a day, plus feed and what, you know, and whatever else is required on the day-to-day runnings of a farm as they move up and down the road. Do you think that's covered by the capital value for the rates? I disagree on that.
it will pay a DC if it potentially has to build more houses, so it pays DCs on those houses. And if it builds a cash shed, it has to pay DCs on the cash shed. So it pays all that originally, and also it's already paying for we get a wee bit we forget sometimes that if there's more road traffic on the road, it's paying more road user charges as well. So there is costs that are going into this. It's not all borne by the council 100%. There is other revenue streams that property will pay towards roading.
Any other thoughts? Debate on?
Just my 2 cents. I think for agriculture, we can't add anything in now that would be have to be something when we come back in 2027 if we're going to decide on that, because we haven't talked to anyone about this. Yeah.
We all happy with that line of tracking, Councillor Cameron?
Didn't we talk about the roading DC at length though at our workshop? And I thought we did.
We have had a number of conversations about the matter, but what we didn't do is go out for consultation on it. So we haven't talked to our community.
Okay, I think the feel is we're going to revisit that one, Richard.
There were some further submissions from Mr. McGurr in relation to small standalone dwellings. He felt we should take DCs at the time that the applicant applies for a PIM. To be a non-consented small standalone dwelling, you must apply for a PIM. And in our policy, that's the trigger to say, hey, there's a DC that's going to be payable here. In our policy, we say the trigger for invoicing is at the end, because they have to come back with a whole bunch of documentation that we file, and that's a requirement of the process, and that's the point at which we can confirm that that the documentation confirms that it is technically a small standalone dwelling, that it is 70 square metres or less to the inside of the walls, that it's been built within the 2 years that they had, etc. If any of those things aren't met, then technically it's not a non-consented small standalone dwelling, and it's up for a full HUE, and so that's why we would retain the trigger that we've got in the policy for invoicing. Mr. McGurr has noted that we haven't included specifically the fact that in our definition that a small standalone dwelling has to be 70 square metres measured to the inside of the external walls. He's correct, that is the definition. We didn't set out to make our definition absolutely exhaustive. We said it was it generally means what's in the legislation. This is a fine point. I'm not going to die in the ditch. If you'd like us to add in the detail that he suggests, happy to do that. I don't think it's necessary, but not a ditch to die in.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Taking it at PIM stage is more in line with the other change we're looking at of taking our DCs at subdivision stage, because you're getting them earlier. And if someone built something that was over 70 square metres, internal corners, then it would be outside that policy, and it actually should be deemed they can't do that, and they need to either remove it or demolish it or make it right. So, because we can't then suddenly consent something that's...
What we didn't want to do was have someone come in and say, I'm applying for a PIM and I'm going to build this house and it's going to be a non-consented small standalone dwelling, and we say, okay, here's your invoice for half an HUE, and then at the end, 2 years later, they come back and we've got to go and hit them up for the next 50%. We thought it's better to invoice them once and invoice them at the end. That was Michael's rationale, and I support that, because he understands the process.
Don't see how, when you put in for a consent to build a 70 square metre home, you can build something else and actually follow our normal council process of having that accepted. I'd be telling them they had to pull it back down.
They would have to do that. We're just trying to avoid adding to that problem by having to chase them for half an unpaid DC. You should feel totally confident that if someone applies to build something for 70 square metres and it turns up being 100 square metres, that Michael and his team will be onto that as prudent stewards of the building regulations and the council's finances. But it could be the simple matter, it took an extra month to build it, and that fails to meet the requirement for a non-consented standalone dwelling.
My concern would be that at that stage, if it's not within the consented limits, then we've received no money from them and battle with them anyway. It could end up we get nothing, whereas at least if we go the other way, we've had half of it for a start. But I'm not going to die in the ditch about it, but.
Confirmed policy is proposed around the table. Happy?
Thank you.
Ash, Russell? Ash. Okay, we might break for a cup of tea and go over some more hobby options for you, Richard.
Awesome.
And we'll be back here at 10 to. Thank you, everybody. Welcome back to the RMA fees and DC's policy deliberations. And back to the top table, Richard.
Okay, so we're at the topic of taking development contributions at subdivision, and just wanted to emphasise that we're very keen to keep the decisions about this trigger separate from the debate around whether council will defer that payment. They are related issues, but they are separate issues. The first aspect of this has been referred to earlier today, which relates to non-residential subdivisions. And the fact is that when you're dealing with a non-residential subdivision, you can't know very well what the likely demand is going to be for water, wastewater, roading, etc. We think an appropriate response is to take either some or all of the DCs on those kind of subdivisions at building consent. The recommendation here is to take one HUI per lot per activity for non-residential subdivisions and the balance or refund at building consent. Obviously this would also apply from 1 July 2027 because we're talking about a subdivision here. Happy to take questions.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. If at building consent time we still didn't know what the use of that building was going to be, so someone's building like a specky type thing, or so we don't know the water usage or anything else, how is that handled?
That would be handled through the methodology. We'd have some information from the developer about their intended use, and generally they're happy to give us their expectations around intentions.
Typically with non-residential development, typically commercial or industrial, the reality is you don't know what that business will be initially, you don't know whether it will change over time. So again, don't die in the ditch of perfection. It's about trying to get a typical DC from what will be there. If it's a laundromat, it'll use more water. If it's a supermarket, it'll have more cars. It won't be perfect, and it's just based on the law of averages.
Thank you. Happy with the recommendation? Lots of nods. Thanks, Richard.
The next question is about all the other subdivisions, and really this is the yes or no question. Do you want to take DCs at subdivision? Which means that when a subdivision resource consent is granted, we would issue a notice that they're required to pay a development contribution based on the number of HUEs, and that we would invoice that at or around the time that the developer applies for a Section 224C certificate, which they then use to go to LINs and get titles. The views on this were, I thought, generally supportive. They also split a little bit along ratepayer versus developer lines, but there were ratepayers that didn't like the idea and there were developers who were comfortable with the idea. So it wasn't wasn't strictly bipartisan, just strictly partisan in terms of views.
Questions? Debate? Councillor Wilson.
I'm in favour of this one here, is up there, because it'll make us more consistent with other districts either side of us, which I think is important going forward that we are consistent. It will help council to fund improvements that we need to do with more subdivisions in a timely manner, rather than us having to bankroll them until, because we've still got to do it. We can't just defer it and wait for the section sell. Normally we've done the work so that when the section sell, everything's ready to go. I do recognise that the developers will be under some strain with this, but by the next question around timing, hopefully that can help. But I think it's one of those things that we need to just get in line, and it makes more sense from us to take it at the building consent at the subdivision time, than later in the piece.
I think there's the factor of the no surprises for the person doing the building as well, and there's a lot going on, as I mentioned, the workshop at that stage, and maybe all the information's not quite getting through, and next thing you've got an invoice and a nasty wee surprise, so it takes that element out. Councillor Todd.
Thank you. Yes, I'm also in favour of going with the recommendation. I just think, you know, you are split between the developers and the house builders, but I go along with the house builders because it takes that surprise out of that cost that they didn't know they had to pay, and I think we should be aligning ourselves more in that direction rather than with the developers.
Thank you. Councillor Everest.
Yeah, I'm not in favour of taking that subdivision, but in favour of taking it when the section is sold.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gilson.
Did we get any clarity on how it might work if we did it when the section is sold? Like, we've had a few ideas.
That would be a huge administrative burden for council to control a process that is in the private market. 224C is a council prescripted process. If you have to then keep track of 100 lots and when they're sold over a 1, 2, 3, 4 year period, that is something that's totally outside of council's records. Again, in simple economic terms, the DC gets rolled into the section price. People buying that section can expect to pay a little bit more than under the status quo, but it's the same amount of money. And think of this, you're dealing with one customer. If you've got a 100 lot subdivision, at the moment you're dealing with 100 customers. Some of them know about it, some of them don't. If you get it off the developer, like every other council does, you're dealing with one customer at one point in time. And the other point I will make here is it's quite common for developers to have a single resource consent with 100 lots, for example. They can stage the certification of those titles, so they can do 20. They can get 224C for 20 sections, pay those 20 sections, sell those. They can come in and do stage 2. So that's quite a common way to spread that cash flow out for them. But if you're expecting council officers to administer private section sales, that is a lot more work to take lots of dribs and drabs over a longer period, which goes against you are already the infrastructure banker, and you're just carrying that debt for a lot longer if you were to rely on section sales.
Will there be any immediate impacts before July 2027? Like, would they have had to stage that now, or do you know what I'm asking? Like, if they've already planned to do 100?
Yeah, well, look, in any resource or any subdivision consent that comes in before 1 July 2027 will get assessed under the current mechanism. So this is only for subdivision consents after that date. Mm-hmm. And yes, in that case, they will have the opportunity to stage the certification of those titles, which is permitted by the RMA.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Debate? Recommend? Oh, Councillor.
Yeah, I'm happy with this. I just know that within our own systems, within council, there's going to be that crossover period that we're going to have to be very aware of, where there's, you know, we all know there's empty sections now that might not get built on for another 10 years. And so our records are going to, and I know they are, but are just going to have to be very clear on which sections have paid the DC through this process and which haven't, I suppose.
Yep, absolutely. And Ian and his team have got plans in place to make sure that that's well recorded.
Councillor Gilkison?
I just wanted to make a point that I think in a lot of these discussions, we think about developers, there's ones doing these big developments of what we've heard from, but I do want to just point out the impact that this will have on the small communities, i.e. Mount Somers, where a lot of their developers are actually farmers who are carving off a piece of their land, and for them to be doing that to grow that town, I think is going to be a further detriment to the development of Mount Somers, because these farmers are less likely to want to pay that huge upfront cost. So just making a point.
Thank you. Right, so recommendation, yes, take DCs at subdivision. In favour? Thank you. If yes, then when?
Yeah, this is the third leg of the stool. A third of submitters agreed with Council's preferred option that we should take them at 1 July 2027. About a third actually wanted you to go earlier, 1 July 2026. And there were about a third who did not want this to happen or wanted it to happen on the proviso that it could be, the payment could be deferred until settlement. Just wanted to reiterate my earlier advice, keen to try and keep that question of settlement from the trigger, because they are two separate decisions. Our recommendation is to go with Council's preferred option of 1 July 2027 for reasons that have been well articulated throughout the process.
Thank you, Mayor Liz.
No question, but I'd agree with the 1st of July 27.
In favour? Thank you. Thanks, Phil.
So the next issue, and this was the subject of a number of submissions, about enabling Council to defer payment to settlement. Sometimes it was referred to as postponement. And it's the first question really is the yes or no question, and if the answer is yes, then it becomes a question of how. In the summary of feedback, pages I think 28 to 35, there was quite a discussion. We talked about the range of policy approaches taken by different councils. We were open to the possibility that Council would not just be one of the herd, and that we might want to do something unique and bespoke to our district. And so we essentially presented four options, from a hard no to what I think I referred to as a financially prudent approach, to developing an Ashburton district solution, and the final option was just to stick with our status quo. And our status quo is that we'll consider it if we're asked to. But our policy is pretty quiet on what we would consider and how we would do that. The officer's recommendation, because of the sort of administrative risks that Walt's referred to, is that we don't do this. We recognise, however, that that may not be a palatable answer for your community or for you as a council, so we have got other options to discuss. But representing the Development Contributions Project team, that was the clear view.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
If somebody came up to you and asked to have this DC deferred because of whatever reason, and you said our policy is silent on how to deal with that, how would you add more rigour around our policy?
Yeah. If I could just jump in there, that the reality is that these deferral type mechanisms have been tried in for about the last 15 or 20 years, and the reality is that the cost on the developer's side to get the collateral or the backing from a bank to underwrite that deferral is often cost prohibitive for the developers. So it's something that's been offered for a number of years, and it's not used that often.
No one
But
really
the
takes
private development mechanism, which you do have in your policy and which is now prescripted under the LGA since about 2013, that is essentially the answer to that question. There is a means where they can go through a private developer agreement, which is still a very legally heavy process on both sides, but that encompasses all and every options of how much the developer pays and when they pay it, and that has, with some of the, again, it has to be quite a big development to warrant the cost, but that does work from that departure from policy for whatever reason.
Okay, thank you.
In answer to your question about what's the role if the policy is silent, the practice that I've observed in this council is that if the policy is silent, then generally the executive team will bring the question to council to determine. But if the policy is we don't defer payment under any circumstances, then we don't need to do that.
Councillor Maxwell.
Just my only comment, following on from what Walter had just said before, if they can consent in 20 blocks, or whatever number of blocks we have, isn't that a form of deferred payment anyway? Because they're breaking down the cost and spreading it across instead of taking it in one hit. It's just my thought.
Okay. So recommendation is no. Or Councillor Wilson, did you want to?
Yeah, I'm not in favour of it either, because I think that we're not a bank. We're very reasonable in what we charge, and we use that money for the right reason. So therefore, why would we, bank it? Councils shouldn't be just putting debt on so that some parts of the community can benefit from it. Because it's all, if you build a house or you do some of that, it's all part of the process of building a house. You build what you can afford. I'm afraid. If you put an extra room on, you pay for an extra room. So that's just the way it is.
So in favour of the recommendation, no. Thank you.
So the balance of that slide does not require any further discussion. We're now on to the DC charges, and the first issue, this was one that was supported in workshop. It did not attract any submissions, but it was the subject of its own recommendation, and was just taken as part of the overall resolution when Council launched the consultation. We had put in an additional $300,000 of growth capex for work on the Art Gallery and Museum. I'm trying to think of the new name, and I don't want to say it wrong. I'd rather not say it at all and get it wrong. Rotorwhiria? Rotorwhiria, yeah. So there you go, I did get it wrong. So the recommendation is that Council confirm that growth capex.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Wilson?
With the roading one, obviously the number being announced now, does that not include the dirt under the road? Is that included in the price of the bridge?
We're still we haven't
doing the first one.
We haven't got to that one yet.
Okay.
So are we happy with the recommendation?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you. Now, Richard.
Okay, so with the second one, we've now got a firm price on the final price confirmed on the access road to the new bridge. Does that include the price of the land under the road?
No, I believe that's my understanding is it's the cost to construct the road. The DC includes a sum of money for the land purchased that will sit under the road as part of the cost of the overall project. It's in the DC schedule as a separate line item. And I think there's an expectation over time that council will sell the land that was purchased but not required for the road, and may choose to use that to defray the cost of this project, at which point we'll have to adjust the DC.
So that's a yes. I'm not talking about the other land. I'm just talking about physically the bit that the road sits on. So it is included on a proportional basis. I was unsure of that.
It's included in the DC. It's when I said there the final price was confirmed at 19.7 million plus 1.48 million enabling cost. It's not in the 19.7, but it is in the overall DC calculation. So just to be clear about what I'm saying.
Okay, looks like no further questions. Did you have something more, Councillor Wilson?
That extra number is the clarity on that is not. I'm not 100% clear on that extra number. I'm clear on the bridge number because that's what it is what it is. The other numbers I'm not 100% clear on, so that's where I'm just questioning the 1.48 million.
The 1.48 million, Mr. Chamberlain described that to me as enabling costs, so it's work that's been done towards the construction, but prior to the contract price being confirmed, and that is council's share of that expenditure. The land-related cost is in the draft DC policy that Tony emailed to you earlier today.
Councillor Cameron.
So just to clarify, the enabling cost, is that moving skinks or doing detailed design or boring the river to find out where the pillars are going to be?
I suspect it could be all of those things and some other things.
It would be good to have some clarification because it is quite a large sum. It would be good to know that. That might be an aside for another day, but it would be quite good to get that clarification.
What page is it in the draft policy? Oh, you've got the...
On page 35, it
35.
refers to the project itself. With reference to the different numbers that are there, that's because we have, since we've been out for consultation, the price is altered. So now we have the confirmed price that's known, so we'll be readjusting the tables with the price that we now have.
So the price on the draft policy is correct? Not correct. The price on the draft policy is incorrect.
Yes, we, as you'll recall, when we were heading out for consultation, this was before the announcement of the contract with from NZTA with their contractor. So at that stage, we were working on indicative pricing from late last year.
Any further questions? We happy with the recommendation, confirm a lower DC? Nods, yes.
Just confirming the final price at 19.7, is that including GST or excluding? Because the DC's including, but I would have thought the 19 point, just want to make sure we've got that calculation right, if one is and one isn't, or...
It's my understanding that is a GST exclusive price, and when we put it into the schedule, we add the GST at the end.
Okay. All right. Happy then.
Councillor Wilson?
I'm probably a wee bit concerned that we have numbers here and we have numbers there, and none of them are all in one place, and we've just been presented today. You know, I feel like that needs to have been really clarified because it's quite a big number. You know, we've been waiting for the bridge final cost to come, and it's come, but it hasn't been presented sort of officially to council as this is the final thing. It's been been dissolved to us over time rather than actually said bang, this is what it is. So that's where I'm just concerned that, you know, look at these numbers and they're different. So yeah,
I understand what you're saying. We're a little bit caught between a rock and a hard place with this one because it's actually NZTA's numbers that we're then using to roll through. So we're awaiting the announcement, which happened 10 days ago, and that has then enabled us to roll them through into this. But it will be square for the final on the adoption on the 30th of June.
Thanks, Richard.
At the same time that we got the finalised contract price for the connecting road, we also got an updated price on the bridge water main. It was approximately 2.45 million. It's now gone up to just over 3 million. My understanding is that this primarily relates to the need to do more work on the joints of the pipeline, because while this is a very solid structure, if you've ever walked across the bridge to Tynwald, when heavy trucks are going, those bridges move a wee bit, and so the joints need to be able to flex, and so that's where the extra cost was, and therefore that DC overall is a $76 increase including GST, results from that one price adjustment for that one item in the DC schedule, and the recommendation is that we confirm the higher Ashburton water DC.
Questions or debate? Councillor Wilson?
That number has been through the Water Services Committee.
Has
that number been through the Water Services Committee? The new revised number? I'm just because that's where we would have visibility and it would be discussed and technically. Okay.
No.
No, it hasn't, but we can let the team know to bring you back some more information at the next Water Services Committee if you'd like.
Councillor Gilkison?
Do you have a full table yet of what the charges were before we knew all this information and what they are now? Because I note that the roading has gone down, but this one's gone up. So what's the difference between the two for Ashburton?
I do. I could send it to people via email. Do you want that right now?
Yes, I think it would be helpful. Thanks, Richard.
Just a question, when is this going to council for final decision? Is it
30th of June.
30th of June? Okay, so there's a bit of time. There won't be a Three Waters committee meeting. There will be in between there? Yeah, okay.
Councillor Ellis?
Yeah, I mean, if it costs more, the cost is the cost. We'll just get some explanations around that. But with that, then obviously the DC goes up as well. It's a logical conclusion. So, yeah, yeah.
So you're suggesting we could move on? Happy with the recommendation?
I just want explanations around, because I can't see how a water pipe would be designed over a bridge without having expansion joints to allow for that bridge movement in the first place. So I would have thought that would have been a highly technical engineer would have done that day one. So I would like to know why it wasn't.
Sounds good. We'll get that information for you.
Are we happy with the recommendation? Nods? Yep.
Point of clarity, if the Water Services Committee look at it and come to a reduction or an increase or whatever, does that feed into this?
Yeah, I mean, the DCs are basically based on the assumptions in the annual plan or long-term plan, so whatever the budget is agreed and adopted and is what should flow into the policy, which is why these changes are quite common through the consultation process where numbers do change. And these are, we're talking about 70, increased by 70, decreased by 100. We're not doubling DCs here, we're just trying to get them consistent. So
Yeah,
they pass audit.
Yeah, I'm probably just saying that the process, if we follow our process through, it should be, it's approved, therefore it's in and it's real. If it's not approved, it goes in here without being approved. That's what I was concerned about.
Councillor Evers, you had your mic off briefly there. Were you wanting to add something?
I was just following on the concern. Sorry. Just following on the concern of I've actually flown through the numbers and compared with Councillor Ellis's comments.
Thank you.
Sweet. So moving on to the next one, Richard. So I leave that, and we'll come back to it if you like.
You can find the elected mayor to send it to.
Thanks, Richard. Happy to go with the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So we're on to Mount Somers Water DC.
Yeah.
So earlier we talked purely about the methodology, but it is the largest DC in the council's schedule. We've had submissions from the community. We know that there are concerns within the community. I think we've taken the methodology about as far as we can take it. I've looked at some other alternatives where you assume actually that you're not going to get the same level of growth, and therefore you transfer some of the growth capex into level of service. But the result of reducing the number of HUIs and reducing the amount of growth capex still only pushes the number in the wrong direction from a community standpoint. So our recommendation is to confirm the status quo. Happy to take questions and consider alternative proposals. Certainly the conversation that I've had with Walter around this is that we've got a reasonably expensive asset that's serving a very small community, and no matter how you slice and dice it, someone's going to be paying a number that they're not happy with. Anyway, that's all I can really say by way of introduction. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Before Councillor Ellis, Walter, have you got anything you'd like to add? Are you across this? Any further comments?
No, as Richard said, it's a $7 million treatment plant for a community we're measuring in the hundreds. So aside from moving to a district-wide capital contribution of some form, which the current legislation prohibits, we've done this as fairly as we can. There are other methods which would see that development contribution for Mount Somers be probably more than double that, but it just reflects the price of a $7 million treatment plant for a small community.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. I agree with the methodology and everything, but the unintended consequence of this is DCs pay for future growth. This DC's actually prohibited future growth just because of the sheer cost of it. Not one person has actually joined in since we've done this and paid this DC just because of the sheer cost of it. So if we leave it as it is, and I don't know, I don't have an answer to an alternative model, but I think we'll be stymied with growth in Mount Somers. So, and I don't, as I say, I don't have an answer. It's an unintended consequence, But I think it does value some conversation.
Sorry, just to follow on from that one point I will make is that while this development contribution of nearly $20,000 for a water supply is probably high by Ashburton districts, you're not breaking any national records here. We could go around a number of different councils. I think Tauranga City sort of sent the bar about 5 years ago when they increased their water supply contribution to $15,000 per lot. So this just reflects the changes following from Havelock North and following some of the changes at central government around the cost of or the standards of water supply, similar for wastewater, increasing that bar and increasing that the levels of treatment and at both water and wastewater has pushed the cost of delivering these services up. So $10,000-$15,000 is relatively standard now for both water and wastewater, and it's not uncommon for smaller schemes to pay $20,000-$25,000. So that's you're not breaking any records here.
Thank you. Councillor Gilkison.
So while I understand that we're not breaking records, I'm not sure Havelock is a fair comparison given that that community is quite different to Mount Somers. I think that what we can see here is that when you apply a policy in a broad stroke, there is always exceptions to the rules where it just does not work. And yep, you can charge more because it charges more, but to Councillor Ellis's point, the detriment is that if there's no growth, then what is the risk of this money? So if we have less people moving to Mount Somers, less people paying the DC, no growth, then who is paying it?
Is that a question?
Yeah, who's paying it if there's no one moving to Mount Somers?
If we don't get the money from development contributions, we'll end up getting it from the ratepayer.
So I guess my point is the risk to council is that we stifle the Mount Somers growth, and this continues, and we've already seen this for the last 3 years, that the growth has been stifled. Then actually, in 10 years' time, we'll be sitting here, and it's going to come back to council as an issue, where we'll get a report saying, hey, look, there's an outstanding amount on the Mount Somers DC, we have to now work out how to fund it, whereas there's been people using the service who probably haven't been paying their fair share of it. And I know that you can say, oh, well, everyone else, their water's more. You could even say that putting in your own water system, this is cheaper than that. But the reality of how this actually plays out is a little bit different, because if you're someone who's just had a holiday in Mount Somers and you think, oh my goodness, this was amazing, I loved this, and then you have a look around, you're diligent, so you do your due diligence, you look at all your prices, your costs and your DCs, and you go, oh, okay, that's you know, I'm from Lincoln, that seems like a fair DC, but then you're like, I'm just going to have a wee look around to see what else is there. So you look at Staveley and you go, oh, well, I'd have to put in my own water system, but actually if I was going to be going over there, I'd be paying 20 grand anyway, and I quite like, you know, the Staveley community, so I'll go here. Or you might look to Mayfield, which is just 10 minutes down the road, has a better pub, and you'd only have to pay $12,000. You'd get your water and all your services. So while I agree that $20,000 may not seem like it big enough, when you're comparing it with everything around you, the only thing that will happen is that Mount Somers will be further stifled. So we need to compare apples with apples, because essentially that is what's going to continue to happen. And I did talk to Richard Joseph, who's a local builder in the area, and he said that since the DC's come in, there have been people who have already put off their building plans, and at the moment there's a sour taste in everyone's mouth. Nobody wants to develop, and then also, as I said before, the farmers who have the properties in the area are less likely to actually carve any off for any development. So I just don't see how this will ever be paid. And it's more about the risk to council. We can have it sitting here, we all feel good about it because we're not charging the ratepayers, but no one's paying, and someone will pay in the future.
Councillor Maxwell.
As far as I understood, we can't put it across all ratepayers straight away, is that correct?
the Local Government Act principle is pretty clear. You should be putting it against the community. That's not to say you can't use a mechanism such as capping to reduce the number, which has the effect of putting it against, puts the capped sum, or the difference between the capped sum and the DC as it currently stands against all the ratepayers in the water group. That's, I think, your only mechanism. At this point, you're not discussing an alternative. You're just discussing that you don't like the status quo.
Councillor Cameron.
I am sorry that the DC is so high, but as Warren mentioned, we've spent $7 million on the water system in Mount Somers, and it's not reasonable to expect the rest of the community to pick up paying for that plant, given that they will not benefit from that plant and they won't be drinking out of that plant. A lot of things, I think, if it was $2,000, I'm assuming that would not be a barrier. If it was 15, would that be a barrier? Like, there's a lot of very expensive DCs around New Zealand, everywhere, and I appreciate $20,000 is a lot of money, but it's also a localised water treatment plant that's used in Mount Somers. So I would support the DC for the water treatment plant in Mount Somers.
Councillor Gilkison.
Further to Richard's comment, I would like to propose that we put a cap on it, and I would like their total, so including all of their DCs, not just water, everything, to be capped to the next highest, which is Methven. So that Mount Somers, Methven, you are paying the same overall DC. And I take your point, Councillor Cameron, but no one's going to pay for it. That's the problem here. No one will pay for it. You can say that Mount Somers should be the ones to pay for it, but actually if no one's moving there, no one's growing, then nobody is paying. And it's a future ratepayer problem, and I think we've had enough of those surprises lately.
Councillor Everest, do you want to have your say rather than the messages? They're flashing on and off the screen.
Sorry, I just wasn't sure how well the sound is going, that's all. I agree with Councillor Gilkinson in terms of the cost of the development contribution has got way out of line at Mount Somers, and concur with their comments about the striking of development. I think we definitely need to look at another approach at how we can actually deal with this.
Do we have some further questions or debate? Councillor Todd.
Thank you. Were the costs known at the time of the when this was built, or when it was being planned? Because obviously it was before our time. But you know, were the locals aware of the cost? And you know, at the time of the or before it was built, when it was being planned.
I don't have the full answer to that question. What I do know is that when we first developed the DC for Mount Somers water supply, it was based on the budget for the project, which was 3.8 million roughly, and the actual came in at closer to 6.7 or so. So it doesn't answer the full question, but that's what I can tell you.
Tony.
Thank you. And further to that, so this was introduced in 2024. Yes, yeah. So as a part of our long-term plan process, the DFC went out for consultation in a parallel process to that. So we did have a meeting up in Mount Somers. It wasn't the topic of conversation. It was the local perspective in the room was a view of, they felt that it was fair that new properties should be paying towards the upgrade of the water services scheme, and that was an interesting theme to get, because we were expecting a different reaction perhaps from the community. But granted, that doesn't necessarily mean the people who were in the line to purchase those sections were standing in the room at that time, and we've heard that subsequently.
Councillor Cameron.
Just as a little bit of an aside, Te Mata Arawai, or our water regulator, is demanding more and more requirements with regards to our water. So we will see cost of compliance with regards to water management go up and up and up and up. So we have to acknowledge that, and we're going to have to accept. I mean, it's not related to the DC, but it's related to the whole cost of water in this district.
Mielis.
I've just got the DCs up on, so the current DCs up on screen now. So Methven is a total of 12.5. The water is 5,105, but then you've got everyone has charged the community infrastructure of 6,179. And then of course the new DCs will have the roading on top. So Mount Somers is 21,510 just for the water at the moment. So I'm just thinking, how could we, because I remember when this went out for consultation, and I think we had maybe one person make mention of it in the consultation process, given that there was probably quite a lot of other stuff that was going on. So there was the stock water, there was a lot of other stuff in the LTP that was being talked about as well. So is there any way, because I do understand Deb's point of view of not necessarily decreasing the water, but maybe could you take out community infrastructure? Is there something that you could do to sort of balance it slightly?
Tony?
As the team have mentioned, there is a capping option, and I can remember back in the day, I've been around too long, that council did take that approach across many of its DCs, because there was when we first came through with this policy, when council was concerned that the introduction of a policy like this would stymie development, full stop, and didn't want to see that. So the initial policies that we had were capped, and so there might have been the number that spat out of the formula, so to speak, and then council made a decision to basically artificially lower that and squeeze the balloon a different way and push the costs a different way. So council does reserve that right, and we could come back to you on the 30th with an option to do that if that's what you wanted us to do.
I don't think it would hurt to have a look.
Councillor Wilson.
Probably the question that troubles me is that if you reduce the DC in an area, all you do is change the land value, as we've talked about earlier on with the changing the date from building consent time to, yes, to help me, the number we use for charging DCs and subdivisions in Ashburton. That's been brought about a bit because of the change in people buying those sections haven't perhaps realised, and it's all to do with the value of the land they buy, the section value. And I look at this one a wee bit the same. If I'm buying a section in Mount Somers, that section value is less to me because I've got to pay a bigger DC than if I'm buying one in a subdivision in Ashburton. And the reality of it is that the one in Ashburton has many, many houses around it. It's cheaper for the district to provide that service, that water, and from then into the future, once you've paid your DC, you only pay the average. You pay the same rate that the person in the new subdivision in Ashburton, you pay that in Mount Somers. And I'm sure the difficulties of providing water in Mount Somers is a lot greater than providing it in a normal urban environment where there's much more infrastructure already in place, there's much more scale. So I'm probably in favour of the DC. I know it's uncomfortable, but I think it goes back to the land value. We've improved the lot of Mount Somers. Anybody who wants to subdivide now can guarantee they have very good quality, some of the best quality water in New Zealand, more than likely, because of the membrane plant and they're exceptionally good quality plants. So I'm sorry, Mount Somers, but I'm in favour of it.
Is there a counter argument that goes back to boil water notices and that's not going on in a region like Ashburton, and there's a difference there? And I dare say legislation has its say, Richard, but you know, it's a community there that's getting the benefit of that water plant, not just the growth factor of it. Is there any way that you can account for that? There is a question in there somewhere.
I'm not any kind of expert on how Tamata Arawai works, but I think if you've built a membrane filtration plant, I don't think you can turn it off and then ask people to comply with boil water notices. I would imagine that they would take a dim view of that. I was going to take the opportunity just to clarify what I think Councillor Gilkison was proposing, which is that the current, under the draft policy that we've consulted on, the aggregate DC for Mount Somers, including water, community infrastructure and roading, comes to 27,165, and at Methven the same number is 16,120. What she is proposing is that we cap the total Mount Somers DC at 16,120. The most effective way to do that is to actually cap the water DC, reduce it by approximately $11,045. I say approximately because earlier we noted that it should come down by $350, so it's $11,045 less $350. That makes the water DC for Mount Somers 9,459, and the total DC, including roading and community infrastructure, 16,120, the same as Methven. And at this point I'm not clear whether that is supported or whether the prevailing view is you'd like to see that in writing on the 30th of June as something to debate.
I think we're getting there. Councillor Cameron?
Thank you. You said the total DC for Methven, I beg your pardon, for Mount Somers 16,100. In the table, it's got the Methven DC at 16,000. Under the draft policy, $235. I don't think GST would explain the difference.
The difference there is in the table I've got. I've already adjusted the roading DC down by $115.
Okay, so if I was a developer, and we've talked about charging development now at consenting, you know, rather than building a development contribution. When I look at the DC for Ashburton, it's $12,300. I may say if I'm building what we didn't know what was affordable housing, but we're assuming affordable housing is less costly housing, I'll say, well, that DC is far too high, because cost is all about perspective. And I will say that's far, far too high. I think the rest of the district, or the people connected to the water supply, should pay the DC for water connected to my small homes or my granny flats or my unconsented requirements in my backyard, and I'll pay $2,000 because I'm not going to drink as much of that water. Like, where is this going to stop? I think, cost is, if you're a millionaire or a multiple millionaire or whatever, they may think $20,000 isn't particularly expensive. Whereas if you are less than a millionaire, you may think it's a tremendously expensive sum. So I think it's all a perspective. I don't accept that people are not building in Mount Somers because of the $20,000 water development contribution. I think that maybe there's nobody buying the northeast industrial estates, and that we've been explained to us that there's nobody buying them because there's no demand. So there's a whole lot of, I don't think it's a simple equation that we as the uninitiated can sit around and ho-hum and blame this, that or the other for whatever is a lack of traction in Mount Somers sections. And also, is that our responsibility or are we overstepping? Because when this DC is not, is adjusted down, or if this DC is adjusted down, somebody has to pick up that variation. And I think when we had Mayor Brown, we all sat around and we were told what that variation would be around the table. And it was actually, the sum was actually worked out, and we were told it was an extra, whatever it was, $35 or 80, I can't remember. And we felt that was not appropriate to do that. So that's, I think it's just worth considering that you make one rule for one community, you have to make it for another community. You have to be consistent. You cannot just arbitrarily decide something arbitrarily.
Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. So with consistency, we have an all of district roading DC. So you're expecting Mount Somers people to help pay for the new road that some of them will probably very rarely, if ever, use. But when it comes to water, we're...
Well, they're the only ones using that water, Russell.
No, you can go and stay in Mount Somers if you want and drink water up there. No one's stopping you from doing that. So same as no one's stopping them from using that road. All I'm just trying to say is I think there needs to be some fairity around this. I think a capping somewhere, I don't know where, I probably wouldn't go quite as low as where Deb's at, but I could be comfortable with a different figure. But I think maybe today's not the day for this. If the feeling is, if it's status quo, well then this conversation finishes anyway. If not, I think something else has to come back around that capping, and we then have that discussion then. But if there's a greater feeling for status quo, well, we move on.
Councillor Gilkison.
So in your methodology, you've got the short-term amount that you've put in. And so for the first 80 Hueys, so that's the first 80 houses built, they pay the short-term amount. How long does everyone think Mount Somers will take to build 80 houses? And that's not even the long-term projections. It's actually not about poor Mount Somers and whether they want to pay for it. It's about how will it get paid in general, full stop. Because the current policy, it won't get paid. This policy does not work for this community, and that's the crux of it.
So are you saying 80 houses will take a long time?
There's 150 houses there at the moment, and it's been that way for pretty much until 3 years ago or 5 years ago, when a couple of farmers decided to shave off a chunk of land. And even then it was how many houses added? Well, no, none in the last 3 years.
Well, you've put a water treatment plant for over 450 houses, so that could be part of the problem.
And I think that is part of the problem as well, in which some of the requests we get, they do bring that up, that the water treatment plant is pretty excessive for the community. And also it went massively over budget. So it's easy to say that back in the day when you were looking at the prices, you were budgeting on 3.8 million and it came in at 6.6. Well, thereabouts.
So I guess the question is maybe not status quo, it's do we want some figures on capping or some options? So let's pose that question. Do we want... Oh, sorry, Julie. Councillor Moffat.
Yeah, I would like to see some capping options, like more than one, and variations in that and what that actually means for the wider community as well. So, yeah, I'd like more detail.
Could have just waited and put your hand up. Capping and figures in favour. Thank you. Thanks, Richard.
Just one more point on. I believe this is a good discussion. It's something that they can bring back next time. But I would recommend that we are talking about a form of cross subsidisation here. I would recommend that we keep that to the water supply development contribution. If we start trying to take out roading ones or community infrastructure, it sort of blurs the line, and probably brings in some legislative issues. So, and unfortunately, there's still going to be infinite range of options around, coming all the way back down to Methven and somewhere in between. But there should be some fairly simple percentages we can apply, and obviously that's going to have a rates impact on the rest of the community that we can quantify in dollar terms.
Thank you.
Just in that report we get, because obviously we've paid for this thing, so where is that coming from, that money? Because it's not coming from the Mount Somers community, I assume. Yeah, we would have borrowed the money to build that at $7 million. Someone's paying that loan.
Is that the group?
Won't it be coming from the water services? Just general water? No, it's the general person who's connected to water in Ashburton District, the Ashburton Water Services. It's not the general. It's anybody who's connected to the Ashburton water supply. Anybody connected to the Ashburton. Yeah.
Thank you. Happy, Richard?
No.
No.
No, I'm not happy. The reason I'm not happy is that I would appreciate a little bit more guidance on the capping options you'd like to see. I'm the last person who should be deciding what the options are. I'm not an elected member. What I would like to suggest that you might want me to bring back is the proposal from Councillor Gilkison. And then we've got a range between 16,000 and 27,000. Do you want to see a couple of equal steps, like 16 to 19, 19 to 22, that sort of thing? With that,
Councillor Ellis?
Thank you. Can we just change that to just talking the water DC only? So, because I was thinking a cap of 15,000 on the water DC, which just takes 5,000 off of what it is now, but without comparing all the other DCs with it. But that was where I was at. But yeah, sorry, I don't know if that helps or not.
so under Councillor Gilkison's proposal, the water DC ends up sitting around 9,500. So we could say 9,500, 12,500, 15.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, we need, if you're going to have options, you have to have the status quo. And why would you, you're almost going a bit many if you're going 4. I'm just saying you need the status quo as the first one, and then the others are reductions from that.
Yeah.
Just one comment, and also, and I support this exercise, but also we need to know the impact on the rest of the community for that.
Thank you, appreciate that clarification. Almost the last slide. These are a couple of wrap-up recommendations. The first is that officers prepare the policy and the amended revenue and financing policy for adoption on 30th of June based on the decisions made during deliberations, and obviously that will need that direction is also clarified by the request for some more options around the Mount Somers water supply capping. And the second recommendation is that officers prepare, there'll be draft responses to submitters consistent with Council's decisions and the content of the summary of feedback.
Everybody in favour of those two? Councillor Ellis?
Thank you. Would that capping be in time to go to the Water Services Committee meeting on, I'm just looking for a date, 24th of June, so that's then got a week after that before the 30th. Would that work, Richard?
I don't think it's difficult to run the calculations and show you what the capping options look like, but more work to work out the impact on the community. The more tricky thing is that the deadline for the Council Agenda on the 30th of June is pretty much exactly the day the Water Service Committee is meeting.
Okay.
So
we'd have to find an earlier date.
Through the chair, I was just trying to understand the desire to see it earlier versus the 30th of June. Is there a concern? Are you wanting to make it?
Just so the exact amount then would be there for the 30th when we presented it, rather than having the debate on the 30th. But yeah.
Yeah, I can understand what you're saying. I think it's going to be cleanest if we do it all on the 30th, and we'll make whatever amendments we have to the policy following that. I'm just a bit concerned of pushing too tight on time and bringing something half-cooked.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
Oh, thank you. So are you proposing that the capping that we've discussed for Mount Somers would go to the Water Services Committee? No. No, I think it would come to council. There's no need for it to go to this is a capping on a DC. It's not a water quality issue or anything.
Okay, all in favour of the two recommendations on screen? Thank you. And the last slide, Richard, come on.
Hang on. No, you've got to let me have my last little speech for the day. First of all, thank you all for all your efforts getting here. I particularly wanted to thank Mayor McMillan for leading our public workshop and the other members who contributed to that at that workshop. There is no replacement for elected members publicly leading their policy. The original plan was that I'd do most of the talking, presenting, and that isn't how it worked out, and it was better handled that way. And there were other people who contributed. I think Councillor Wilson answered some questions. It showed real ownership of the proposal you took to the community, so thank you for that. We are nearly there. It's so close. Sorry, no presentation will be complete without a cat meme. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, everybody.